Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, in the first topic, we are going to trace the legacy of the father of Indian Constitution, BR Ambedkar, and his viewpoints on the caste system which still prevails in our country in the light of the recent controversy which has been sparked by the statement made by the Honorable Home Minister. Then in the second topic, we'll try to learn about a treaty which has surfaced in the news under negotiation at United Nations General Assembly, a treaty called as Prevention of Crime Against Humanity Treaty. Then from your simplified section, we'll be taking up 5 news. We will not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide the much important value addition and practice questions, keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2025. So stay tuned. In light of the recent controversy which has actually been sparked by the statement made by the Minister of Home Affairs, the articles today actually highlight BR Ambedkar's journey, his contribution towards social justice, and his stand on the caste system which still prevails in our country. And all of this forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of modern history and the subsection significant personalities. So when we are talking about BR Ambedkar, the father of Indian Constitution, also fondly called as Baba Saheb, who was not only a luminary political jurist but also a social reformer in his own right, and who played a pivotal role in India's freedom struggle, where he actually turned out to be the voice of downtrodden. Let's first start by tracing his history, starting from the year of 1891 to 1921, or the era before he actually entered into the domain of Indian politics, and the experiences very particularly which actually shaped his thought process. So the year was 1891 when BR Ambedkar was actually born in the region of Mahu, or the modern day Ambedkar Nagar, in the state of Madhya Pradesh, to his father RM Sakpal, who was actually serving as a military officer in the British Empire. In which caste? In a particular caste called as Mahar, which was considered to be untouchable at that point of time. So in the year of 1897, at the young age of 6 years, BR Ambedkar actually became the only untouchable to actually be enrolled in the Elphinstone High School. And 10 years down the line, by the year of 1907, he had actually joined the Elphinstone College in Bombay, which was actually affiliated with the Bombay University, which was created in the year of 1857 under the directive of Charles Wood Dispatch of 1854, which actually introduced which particular theory? The theory of downward filtration. Right? Then by the age of 22 years, he actually, in the year of 1913, he availed to himself a Baroda State Scholarship, a scholarship of around 11.5 sterling per month, which was actually given by Sayaji Rao Gaikwad III of the Gaikwad family, which actually helped BR Ambedkar to pursue post-graduation in Columbia University from the year of 1916 onwards in New York City. Then in 1916, he also joined the London School of Economics as well. Keep this in mind that during this time period, he actually majored in several subjects such as, for example, your history, philosophy, anthropology, polity, etc. And he wrote several important theses such as, for example, the idea of caste in India. Now, by the year of 1918, he had returned to India and he had joined as a professor of political economy in the Sydenham College in Bombay. And remember that in 1921, he was eventually going to complete his post-graduation degree and completing his thesis, the thesis which he submitted, and that thesis was Problem of Indian Rupee. So now we have reached to the year of 1921. During this time period, after his return specifically, and even during his childhood, he had actually faced a lot of discrimination. The reason being that he is coming from an untouchable caste, and that is Mahar. And these experiences has actually been very vividly described by BR Ambedkar himself in his autobiography called as Waiting for Visa, where he described instances such as, for example, how in his school, in an Elphinstone school, he was made to sit on the floor of the school. And he used to bring a kind of a gunny cloth from the home so he does not pollute the surrounding. Or for example, let's say if BR Ambedkar was feeling thirsty, then he actually had to call the peon of an upper caste, who used to hold the jug and pour the water to BR Ambedkar to make sure that the water and the jug does not get polluted for the upper caste students in that school. Or for example, when he returned back to India in 1918, he actually started serving for the Baroda government. And for that purpose, he wanted a resident. But he was actually not allowed even by his Parsis, Christian and Hindu friends to stay at their house, considering he was untouchable. And that's why he remarked that the idea of untouchability actually applies equally to Hindus and Parsis, both of them. So driven by these experiences over a period of time, BR Ambedkar actually started developing a kind of an antagonism toward the caste system which prevailed in our country, and thus took a vow to take active steps against that. The first chance which he got was when he was called to testify before the South Borough Committee, or the Franchise Committee, which at that time was actually drafting the Montague-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. So you guys can recall that how the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909 had actually floated the idea of a separate electorate for the Muslim. And this South Borough Committee actually recommended, and the Government of India Act 1919 actually implemented it by extending this separate electorate to the Sikhs, to the Anglo-Indians, to the Christians as well as Europeans. So when BR Ambedkar is being called to testify before the committee, he demanded for this separate electorate for the depressed classes as well. However, the idea was rejected. So to further sensitize the masses about the grievances which they are facing, this masses constitutes what? The depressed class people. The idea of Bahujan, this term Bahujan, which was actually first coined by Jyotiba Phule. You guys can recall Jyotiba Phule, who actually established Satya Shodhak Samaj in the year of 1873, and who wrote actually a very famous book about the plight of these untouchable people in our country called as Gulamgiri. So to sensitize these masses, these downtrodden people, BR Ambedkar started a Marathi weekly in the year of 1920 called as Mook Nayak, with the help of financial assistance of Shahu of Kolhapur. And in the events of this, he eventually realized that these downtrodden, they need a kind of a political mouthpiece, a political organization which can actually lay down their grievances much better manner in the front of British government, and that led to the formation of Bahishkrit Hitkarni Sabha in the year of 1924. By this time, BR Ambedkar had also realized that there will be need of a kind of a social upliftment movements for this downtrodden, and thus in the year of 1927, he actually launched a Mahat Satyagraha, the background of which was actually laid down by a kind of a Bombay Legislative Council resolution of 1923, which basically stated that if there is any public places, let's say for example there is a public park or a public tank which has been funded by the government of British, then it has to be equally accessible to all class of the people irrespective of their caste, thus even to the depressed classes as well. But was it being implemented in the reality? Absolutely not, because there was a staunch opposition by the upper caste Hindus who were saying that how these lower castes can draw the water from the same well tank from which we are drinking. So that will lead to the kind of the purity and the pollution concept. That is why, led with the rural and the local leaders of that particular area, who were A.V. Chitre, G.N. Sahasrabuddhe and S. Tipnis, accompanied with them, BR Ambedkar actually went to this Chaudhar tank and drank the water from the public well, and thousands of untouchables just followed his suit. At the very same place, he also made the class or kind of a call to the depressed class women, where he called them to actually start living now like an upper caste woman and start having the same practices, right? However, obviously you guys can actually guess the kind of the response which might have been coming from the upper caste people. So they vehemently resisted it. There was a kind of a situation of riot which existed. So in kind of grievances which BR Ambedkar was holding, he eventually realized that all of this is being actually kind of being driven from the historical injustice, or the roots of which lies in the ancient scriptures such as for example Manu Smriti, and thus on the day of 25th of December 1927, he actually burned Manu Smriti at the public place, the day which is now celebrated as Manu Smriti Dahan Din. In line of these moments, there was another moment, and that was Kala Ram temple movement, which took place in the year of 1930, which was a kind of a temple entry movement. So there are chains of such temple entry movements, such as for example Vaikom Satyagraha or Guruyavad Satyagraha. One was Kala Ram temple movement, which was led by BR Ambedkar. This Kala Ram temple, which actually lies in the Panchvati area of Nasik district. Panchvati area is the very same area which is supposed to be where the Lord Ram and Ma Sita actually spent their exile from 10th to 12th year on the bank of Godavari river, on the bank of which this particular temple is situated. The name actually derives from the black statue of Lord Ram and thus Kala Ram temple, the same temple where the PM visited and prayed as well during the Pran Pratishthan journey which he was taking. So this is the way we kind of connect the current affair with the historical aspects as well. So by this time we have reached to a very significant year, and that is the year of 1930. This year is actually marked by two prominent events. One is obviously the launch of civil disobedience movement, specifically on the date of 6th of April 1930, when the Gandhiji is actually going to break the salt law at Dandi. In response to what? In response to the rejection of his 11 demands by Lord Irwin, who was the viceroy at that time. And this is in the continuation of the demand of Poorna Swaraj or complete independence, which was laid down by Lahore Resolution of 1929. So can any one of you tell me that when Gandhiji is actually leaving the Sabarmati ashram and he is going to walk till Dandi, who were, like, how many were the actual original followers who accompanied him? What was the number? Now, in response to this civil disobedience movement, which was launched by Indian National Congress, the British government said that we are going to conduct round table conferences. 3 such conferences took place from the year of 1930 to 1932. And this idea of Poorna Swaraj, Lahore Resolution, if we just go a little bit past to that, so you guys can recall the kind of Nehru report. Why Nehru report was actually drafted? Because there was a kind of a challenge which was given by the Britishers to us that we cannot draft our constitution. Because at that point of time, there was a commission, an all-white commission which had arrived in India, and that was Simon Commission in the year of 1928, which actually came to review which particular act? The Government of India Act 1919. So BR Ambedkar, representing Bahishkrit Hitkarni Sabha, actually went and asked again the very same demand, and that was the separate electorate for depressed classes. So that is going to become the kind of the base for the discussion of roundtable conferences. But the idea is that now there is existing a kind of an ideological differences when it comes to the caste system. So when Gandhiji is going to represent Indian National Congress in the second roundtable conference, the only conference which Congress actually attended, he says that the people of the lower caste forms an integral part of the Hindu society. However, BR Ambedkar had a complete opposite viewpoint. So let's try to analyze the difference in the approaches of the annihilation of untouchability between Gandhiji and Ambedkar first to actually understand the backdrop of the Pune Pact 1932. So Gandhiji's viewpoint on Varnashram was that he actually considered untouchability as a blot on Hinduism, but he actually upheld the Varnashram Dham or the 4 divisions, right? Let's say for example in the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya. So he actually upheld it as a kind of an ideal non-competitive economic system of the division of labor. But BR Ambedkar said that this idea of non-competitive, this caste system being non-competitive, is completely baseless. That can be applied even today as well. For example, if you guys can just go and search the data of manual scavengers, just see how many of them actually comes from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Almost 97% of them. So he is saying that this Purush Shukta hymn of the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, which is considered as a kind of a later interpolation, that is actually the root of disabilities which is being imposed on Shudra. When it comes to the religion of Hinduism, Gandhi is actually kind of emphasized on the political role of religion as an integrative force. And he said that the kind of caste antagonism which is being followed by Ambedkar, that can lead to the kind of divisions in the society. BR Ambedkar said that no, this whole idea of caste system and untouchability is actually coming from the Vedas. So denounce the Vedas and ancient scriptures like Manu Smriti. And he said that for this purpose, this lower caste shall actually do what? A political agitation. When it came to the role of upper caste, Gandhiji held the idea of trusteeship model, where he said that upper caste shall take the responsibility of the historical injustice which has been passed on to the lower caste, and thus they shall actually work in the welfare of them. So for example, you guys can recall the untouchability resolution which was passed in the Nagpur session of 1919 on the behest of Gandhi. BR Ambedkar is saying that the moment you are telling me that this upper caste is going to take care of the lower caste, you are basically instilling the idea of servitude among the lower caste. Rather, this lower caste shall actually decide that what is going to be their stakehold in the freedom movement, and that is only where we are going to participate. That is only when we are going to oppose the British government along with you. But keep this in mind that for BR Ambedkar, caste was not a physical barrier but a notion or a state of mind. Hence, the intermarriage and interdialing alone will not annihilate the caste. That's what he held. He actually urged to destroy the belief in the sanctity of the Shastras, which legitimize such Varna and caste order. So, to be specific, Ambedkar actually condemned the religion of rules and not the religion of principles. So, this forms the backdrop of Pune Pact 1932, where the British Prime Minister Ramsay, he actually announces an award called as Communal Award now, where he actually grants the separate electorate for the depressed classes. So 71 seats were now kind of reserved for them. What does this mean? So this basically means that now the people of depressed classes have two votes. One, in this 71 seats, only the people from depressed class can fight. And who will elect them? Only the people of depressed class. Then beside this 71 seats, the depressed class has the power just like to vote like any other general elector, right? So this was the system of separate electorate. BR Ambedkar is demanding this separate electorate, but Gandhi considered that this is nothing but the extension of divide and rule policy of the Britishers, and that is actually going to have a divisive impact on the Hindu religion. So he went to fast unto death at Yerewada Pune jail, where he was lost as he was arrested during the civil disobedience movement. Thus, a kind of a compromise was finally sought, coming with the Pune Pact 1932, where both Gandhi and BR Ambedkar actually represented the people of depressed classes and the Hindus were represented by Madan Mohan Malvi, and this pact actually led to, instead of separate electorate, reservation of seats, and that was extended to 148, and this was implemented in your Government of India Act 1935. Gandhiji, in response to it, said that from now onwards, I will not return to Sabarmati unless and until untouchability is abolished in our country. So he established another ashram at Wardha. Can you guys tell me that, just for information, Sabarmati was not the first ashram which was established by Gandhi in our country. So can any one of you tell me which was the first ashram which was established by Gandhiji in our country? So in response to this, now he is going to create what? An anti-untouchability league, which will eventually be named as Harijan Sevak Sangh. And he will also start sensitizing the masses through newspaper Harijan. So keep this information in your mind. Try to solve this particular question of your prelims. And now we are going to trace the journey of Ambedkar from year of 1932 to 56, where he will eventually establish Independent Labour Party in 1936, which will fight the election. He was actually elected from the Bombay Presidency. In 1942, he was appointed as the member of Viceroy's Executive Council. Between 1947 to 50, he actually acted as a chairman of drafting committee. So it took around 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to draft our Indian constitution. In 1951, he was actually elected from the Rajya Sabha and he became the first law minister of the country. However, he had to resign. We'll see what was the reason for that. Remember that in 1956, he eventually formed the Bharatiya Buddha Mahasabha, the very fateful year of his life as well, when he actually succumbed to death on 6th of December 1956. Now, today's article actually highlights about the viewpoints of Ambedkar on Hindu nationalists. So at the Depressed Classes Conference in 1935, Ambedkar actually declared that he was born a Hindu but he will not die in the Hindu religion, and that you guys can see his conversion to Buddhism, where he is forming Bharatiya Buddha Mahasabha as well. In early 1936, there was a Jat Paat Todak Mandal, so a Lahore-based organization associated with Arya Samaj and Hindu Mahasabha. But that actually cancelled Ambedkar's lecture on the annihilation of caste, a kind of a pamphlet which he wrote in 1936, from where all of these points has been derived, which we were discussing when Gandhiji and Ambedkar's viewpoints. And Ambedkar had already prepared his speech and published it as a monograph that is considered as the most blunt critique of the caste, from where we have driven those points. Gandhiji's arguments were taken by Hind Swaraj, which he wrote in 1909. Yet this never translated into a kind of a political alliance between Hindu nationalists and Ambedkar. And the 1951 manifesto of the Ambedkar Scheduled Caste Federation clearly said that the party would not have any alliance with the reactionary forces such as, for example, Hindu Mahasabha and RSS, which was established in the year of 1925. The Hindu nationalist suspicion of Ambedkar continued even after independence. So when as a law minister, Ambedkar attempted reforms in the Hindu personal law through Hindu code bill, the RSS and the leaders on the Hindu right actually pushed back strongly. The Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, who was co-founder of the Bharatiya Janasangh, described the bill as a threat to the Hindu culture. And because of this staunch opposition, eventually the BR Ambedkar is going to resign from the law minister. So remember these important events, try to attempt this particular question, and we move forward to the next news of the day, where the editorial actually highlights the need of crime against humanity treaty under negotiation amidst the rising global crimes in the world. And this forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the theme of important international treaties. Let's first try to understand the context of this crime against humanity treaty. So on December 4, 2024, the United Nations General Assembly actually adopted a resolution which approved the text of a proposed treaty which is going to govern the prevention and punishment of the crime against humanity treaty. Keep this in mind that this marks the beginning of the negotiation process among the various nations for the conclusion of this treaty. The treaty, which is actually based upon the draft which was submitted by the International Law Commission 5 years back in 2019. And this whole idea of prevention of crime against humanity is actually derived from a very simple notion, which is that what happens when a country actually picks up a group of people and says that we are not either going to protect them, or there can be state-sponsored discrimination against this particular community. So who is actually going to come at their rescue? And for that purpose, we need an international treaty. This idea of crime against humanity actually originated from the Second Hague Convention 1899, a kind of a series of peace conventions which took place in the Netherlands, the idea of which was to actually draft the first international agreed kind of terms on laws of war and prevention of war crimes at the International Statute of Law. Then, for the very first time, when the Armenian genocide took place in the year of 1915, which was actually committed by the Ottoman Empire, which was actually kind of fighting along with the Axis power in your World War I. So during this Armenian genocide, it was for the first time when there was an official condemning of such crime against humanity by countries like Russia, France and United Kingdom. Keep this in mind that in the year of 1945, for the very first time, such idea of crime against humanity and prevention of that was actually codified in your London Convention of 1945. Yes, obviously after the events of World War II, which eventually laid the foundation for what? For your Nuremberg trials. Nuremberg trials, which was actually held by the victory allied powers like Britain and USA. Against whom? Against the defeated Nazi Germany, because of the kind of the war crimes it had committed, right? Such as, for example, the Auschwitz trials you can actually think of. Nazi Germany, which was actually responsible for the killing of 27 million people in the country of USSR itself. Then this idea of prevention of crime against humanity was further codified in the Statute of International Criminal Tribunals of Yugoslavia and Rwanda as well. And finally, this actually took place, a kind of a formalized international treaty through your Rome Statute in the year of 1998, which eventually established what? International Criminal Court in 2003. Let's have a quick idea about the International Criminal Court. So remember that it is the only permanent international criminal tribunal which exists. Its headquarters is where? At Hague, Netherlands. Currently, it has how many members? 123 nations. A small question here, whether India is a member or not. Keep pondering upon it. It has 18 judges, which all comes from different countries, and they are appointed for a term of 9 years. Now, remember a very interesting fact here. The fact is that unlike the International Court of Justice, which we were discussing very recently in the Analyst, unlike that, so International Court of Justice deals with what? Deals with the disputes between states, like such as, for example, India and Pakistan. You guys can recall the Kulbhushan Jadhav case which we discussed. So, unlike International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court only prosecutes individuals. So let's say, for example, if Israel is kind of committing, let's say, crime against humanity against Palestinians, the International Criminal Court cannot hold responsible the Israel as a nation. Rather, it did what? It held Benjamin Netanyahu, the president of Israel, as a kind of a guilty and put charges against him. So you get the idea that it is only going to prosecute home individuals. So it has a kind of a limited power. Keep this in mind. Now, under this Rome Statute, there are 11 type of crimes which can be charged against crime against humanity. Which are those 11 types of crime? There is your murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation or forcible transfer of population, imprisonment or unlawful deprivation of personal liberty, torture, rape or sexual slavery, racial persecution, enforced disappearance of person, the crime of apartheid and other such human acts which actually deprived a person from the personal liberty. Keep this in mind that your war crimes or genocides does not fall in these 11 type of crimes. The reason being we have separate convention for them, such as for example Genocide Convention 1948 and Geneva Convention of 1949. Now when we have understood till here, the article today actually puts certain arguments in the support of the passage of this crime against humanity treaty. First is obviously what? The limited jurisdiction of International Criminal Court, right? So let's say for example that there is a particular nation, Pakistan. Now Pakistan is doing what? That just to, let's say for example, spread terror in our country, it is actually committing crime against humanity, let's say against a very particular community in Pakistan. So can we go to International Criminal Court, approach that and hold Pakistan as responsible? Absolutely not. Because it is not going to be held unless and until it is a state, because we can only hold individual as a responsible. First limitation is that. Second limitation is that these provisions of Rome Statute only applies if both of the countries are the member or the signatory of the Rome Statute, or if the perpetrator of what? Crime against humanity, from where the crime is actually originating or being committed by a particular state, that state is a signatory of Rome Statute. So if Pakistan is not a signatory of Rome Statute, we cannot go to the International Criminal Court. So there exists what? A kind of a limited jurisdiction of ICC, thus challenging to punish perpetrators in the non-member states as well, if we bring this particular treaty. Second is Rome Statute address only individual criminal responsibility, so we cannot hold the state as a responsible. Third is that now we actually have an opportunity to extend the scope to several uncovered areas, such as for example the starvation of civilians. So for example, let's say if we are not kind of directing our subsidized food under National Food Security Act 2013 to a specific particular community, so that can be considered as a kind of what? State taking action against that particular community, right? Obviously we have fundamental rights to secure them, and obviously that is against the idea of social welfare under Article 38 of the Constitution, which is a DPSP. But then also such actions can be possible. Now let's say if there is no recourse or no kind of respite from the government, the state which is actually responsible for the protection of your rights, then you will approach whom? Then obviously you can approach either the judiciary. But what if the judiciary is kind of compromised as well, right? Instead of independent judiciary, what if we have committed judiciary? So what you need at this particular stage, you need an international treaty. Then we can actually further include forced pregnancy and this aspect of terrorism as well. Now what is the rationale behind this treaty? So we'll just have a quick look at the numbers. So just look at the forced displacement of the people which are taking place, and how that has eventually reached to 100 million by the year of 2022. The people who are actually internally displaced, refugees or actual asylum seekers. Just look at the large scale number in the countries like Afghanistan, Myanmar, Somalia, Sudan, your Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Venezuela, etc. So it is basically taking place at an international scale. Then there exists the crime of apartheid included in the list under the Rome Statute. It says what? It says that the 1998 Rome Statute, the International Criminal Court, and 1973 International Convention on the Suppression and the Punishment for the Crime of Apartheid, it actually defines apartheid as a crime against humanity which has three important elements. First is intent to maintain domination by one racial group to another, something which similar is happening in our country as well. Second, a context of systematic oppression by one racial group over another and any kind of inhuman acts. Let's say for example mob lynching. Let's have a look at the data of South Africa because it is less controversial than our country. First is what? Just look at the unemployment rate which exists by race in 2023. I'm not talking about 1994, 2023. Just look at the unemployment rate of blacks or colored people. Just look at how in South Africa the race relations have improved since 1994. Only 30% people actually agreed in the year of 2022, and that is again consistently declining. So there is a kind of a rising apartheid issue as well. Then more people are actually living in modern slavery, such as for example 10 million increase in 2018 index, 50 million people living in such modern slavery, such as for example 28 million in forced labor, 22 million in forced marriages, and 12 millions of them are actually children. And if you look at the government's response, just look at the least government action taken, such as for example in countries like North Korea, Iran, Eritrea, etc. These are the countries with the least action against such crime against humanity. So what is actually India's stand on this particular treaty? Is India part of a Rome Statute of 1998? The answer is no. And why we have not included ourselves in such a prominent international treaty? The first is that India kind of objects that there is non-inclusion of use of nuclear weapons as war crimes. So why you are not including that? And for our context, it is very important. Why? Because we are actually surrounded by two neighboring nuclear powers, Pakistan and China. So obviously that can have detrimental impact for us in the future. So why not to include the use of nuclear weapons as a war crime? First thing. Second, India says that only the crime which are committed during the war time shall be considered as the crime against humanity and not during the peace time. Third is that India does not favor the inclusion of enforced disappearance as crime against humanity. And the fourth thing which we actually want to add in this Rome Statute is the inclusion of terrorism. State-sponsored terrorism like Pakistan. Obviously that can be considered as a crime against humanity. Such as for example the Taj attack of 2006 or Pulwama attack of 2019. Thus, the article suggests that even though currently India does not have any domestic legislation which prohibits such international crime, this was also highlighted in State versus Sajjan Kumar case of 2018, where the court actually held that India, in our country, neither crime against humanity nor genocide have made part of India's criminal law. And the article suggests that this was a kind of a golden opportunity which we could have utilized when we were redrafting our criminal laws in 2023. But it was not even included in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita or Bharatiya Nyaya Suraksha Samhita. So the article suggests that India shall actually bring first of all a kind of a national law where we are actually going to provide prevention against genocide, against crime against humanity, and then we can include the terrorism in that particular act as well, and then create a kind of a global understanding on that. So the idea of terrorism actually reflects in the Prevention of Crime Against Humanity Treaty, which is now under discussion, and that is going to befits our role as a true Vishwa Guru. So keep these suggestions in your mind, try to attempt this particular question, and we move forward to the next news, where we are actually going to read a very interesting news about the recent Supreme Court order about the felling of trees in the National Capital Territory, and we'll try to understand the tree and forest cover in our country. So let's first start that what Supreme Court said. Supreme Court actually restricted down the felling of more than 50 trees without the permission of tree authority in the National Capital Territory, and it said that even though such provision existed under your Delhi Prevention of Trees Act 1994, till now no such particular census has been conducted in Delhi, that how much trees exist in Delhi in the National Capital Territory. So it basically directed this tree authority to actually conduct that census, and it is going to be guided by an expert committee of retired Indian Forest Service officers. This whole exercise will be funded by the Union government and funded from the funds which will be taken from Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority funds, which we are going to understand a little. Remember that this decision and this directive was given by the Supreme Court through the deemed clause through Article 142 of the Constitution, which actually grants the power to the Supreme Court to do complete justice, and this article has also featured in one of the PYQs. Now let's try to understand that what do we mean by this Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority Fund, or this CAMPA fund. So basically the idea actually derives from the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, which basically stated that any non-forest land shall be afforested equal in the terms of the forest land which is actually being diverted for any commercial or any other purposes. So let's say for example if this is a forested land and we are cutting the trees here, so the area through which the trees has been cut, the same amount of area will be afforested in a non-forest land. And for that purpose, a net present value will be calculated, and this net present value shall be paid by the user agency, which is basically responsible for the deforestation which has taken place. To achieve what? To actually achieve the idea of National Forest Policy 1988, which actually set the aim for our country to have 33% of the geographical area under the forest and tree cover. Till now, we'll see that how much we have achieved of that. For that purpose, the user agency actually drives the funds or donates the fund under the Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act of 2016, through which we have created what? National Compensatory Afforestation Fund and State Compensatory Afforestation Fund. So let's say you are a company, power corporation, you are giving me the money, and when you are giving me the money, 10% of that will be kept under National Compensatory Afforestation Fund and 90% of that will go to the State Compensatory Afforestation Fund. Now, there was a provision which actually existed in this Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act of 2016, which was actually becoming a kind of a challenge. What was that? This act basically says that the selected land shall preferably be adjacent or contiguous to the forest which is being diverted. But there can be high unavailability of such land. So what we do in that case? That is why there has been a recent amendment which has been brought under the new Forest Conservation Act of 2023, which has introduced what? Accredited Compensatory Afforestation, ACA. Let's try to understand that first. So now the act basically says that, let's say for example, you are a farmer S in Uttarakhand and you grow 1 hectare of forest on your private land. Now you can actually sell this to a company which is doing deforestation. In Uttarakhand specifically, no. It can be doing deforestation in any part of the country. It can come, it can give you the net present value of the forest which you have grown, and it can show to the authorities that, see, I have done afforestation in the region of Uttarakhand. So let's say for example that company S is in Tamil Nadu. It is going to purchase that 1 hectare of forest to compensate for what the greenhouse gas emission which it is doing. But in this particular case, one major issue will emerge. What will be that? So for example, obviously we are growing forest in the region of Uttarakhand, but there is a large scale deforestation which is taking place in Tamil Nadu. So what will happen? The tree cover will decline in Tamil Nadu. The ecological imbalance will take place. And now obviously because there is less trees in the region of Tamil Nadu, the state is going to become more vulnerable to the climate change impact. So that will violate Article 14 and 21 of the Constitution. Very recently Supreme Court has held that right against climate change is an integral part of your Article 14 and 21. So that is going to be violated as well. When we have understood this, let's now move to have the estimation of the forest and tree cover as per the Indian State of Forest Report 2021. The 2023 report is still not published because the government is saying that we have added few more districts, so it will take us 3, 4, 5 more years. Remember, very recently we were talking about the use of artificial intelligence. Anyway, if we look at the top 10 countries for the forest area, Russia has 49% of its area under the forest and 20% of the world's area. Second comes your Brazil, third is Canada, fourth is USA. You guys can just note this down. It can be asked as a kind of in chronological manner. Remember that India has the 10th ranking where the total percentage of the country area which is under the forest and tree cover, that is 24%. And if we talk about the percentage of world forest area, that is only 2%. If we look at the top 10 countries for average annual net gain in the forest area, this is where India surfaces at third with 0.3.8% increase which we have done. On first, it is actually China. Moving forward, if we look at the kind of specific report for our country, so the total forest cover which existed in 2021, that was 21.71%, right? So that was a kind of an increase of 0.4%. Out of which very dense forest, actually what is very dense forest? It is basically the tree canopy of 70% and above. So that basically constitutes 3.04%. Moderately dense forest which has a tree canopy of 40 to 70%, that was 9.33%. Open forest which basically consists of tree canopy from 10 to 40%, so that was 9.34%. This is the total share which we have. Accordingly, you guys can arrange it chronologically. Now remember that the top 3 states which showed increase in the forest area, they were Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Kerala. And when it comes to the area wise largest forest cover in the country, the state which has the largest forest cover is Madhya Pradesh, followed by Arunachal Pradesh, then Chhattisgarh, then Odisha and then Maharashtra. Now if you look at it, just see the tree cover here. So the tree cover is around 2.91%. And the net increase which we have registered is around 0.76% in the tree cover. Then when it comes to the gain which has been registered by the country, the states, the largest gain was by Andhra Pradesh, then Telangana, Odisha and Karnataka and then Jharkhand. The least and actually the loss of forest which was taking place, the most was in Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram and Meghalaya, and thus mostly in the northeastern states. If we talk about the forest cover in major mega cities, just look at the Ahmedabad. So Ahmedabad has a total forest cover of 9%. When it comes to Bangalore, it was around percentage of the forest cover with respect to the digitized boundary, it was around 6.81%. For Chennai, it was 5% only. For Delhi, it is around 12%. So just keep this in your mind with the major cities data as well. With this, we are going to move forward now to the next topic, where we are actually going to ponder upon a question that whether coconut oil forms in the category of edible oil or hair oil. So before we get into that debate, let's first start with the cultivation of coconut crop in our country. Remember that coconut crop basically grows in the humid tropical climate. So basically from the 20° north to the 20° south area. And the cultivated area in our country is around 1.9 million hectares and a bit more than that. The annual production in the year of 2022 to 2023 was around 12 billion nuts. And it majorly grows in the area with good amount of rainfall, thus majorly in the lines of the coastal area. The rainfall which has to be more than 2000 mm annual rainfall. It can grow in various kind of soils, as for example loamy, laterite, coastal, sandy, alluvial, clay, etc. Now let's suppose that there comes a question which asks you that what are these terms, or these terms are the varieties of which of the following crops. Terms as for example Malayan orange, cow ghat green, Ganga bondam which is grown in the region of Andhra Pradesh, Tiptur tall in the region of Karnataka, or your Chandrakalp which is actually grown majorly in the South India. All of these are varieties of the coconut crop. When we look at the cultivation of this coconut crop in our country, keep this in mind that the largest production actually comes from the state of Karnataka. Then it is followed closely by Tamil Nadu, then Kerala, then Andhra Pradesh, then West Bengal, and then the rest of the states. When we rank our country globally, so when we look at the world's top coconut producers, these are the top 10 coconut producing countries in the world. First is the Indonesia, second is the Philippines, and the third is obviously our country. So our country is the third largest producer of the coconut in the world. Keep these data in your mind. When it comes to the promotion of this coconut crop at a global scale and in our country as well. So 2nd September is basically celebrated as the World Coconut Day. Theme for 2024 was what? Coconut for circular economy. And it is celebrated by this international coconut community, which basically forms the component of UNESCO. And it consists of what? 21 coconut producing countries. And its headquarters is located where? At Jakarta, Indonesia. Similarly, on the basis, at national level, we have a body called as Coconut Development Board, which is actually a statutory body established in the year of 1981 with the headquarters at Kochi, Kerala, which basically kinds of do recommendatory job where, let's say for example, it recommends the government agency to take measures for import and export of the cotton. Recently, it has also launched an initiative called as Hello Norial Call Facility to actually sensitize the coconut farmers, on which, let's say for example, 1 million farmers are dependent upon their livelihood when it comes to the coconut cropping. Now, what is this debate which has featured in the news? So the debate is that whether coconut is an edible oil or not, or it is a hair product for the purpose of taxation. So after the judiciary at several levels pondered this question for more than 15 years, finally it has made a decision, and the decision is that the coconut oil is an edible oil and should be taxed at a lower rate. So edible oils currently attract what? A lower rate of GST tax, that is only 5%, right? In the category of sugar, spices, edible oil, etc. Than the hair care products. So currently in GST we have kind of 6 tax slabs. First is there is no tax slabs, as for example for sanitary napkins or cereal grains. Then there is a 0.25% tax for, let's say, semi-polished stone. Then there is a 12% taxation for your computer, monitor, spectacles, etc. 18% for your soaps, hair oil, and 28% for the white goods, as for example AC, refrigerator, etc. So obviously if the tax rate is going to come down for the coconut oil, it is obvious that the coconut oil production and its export from our country will boom up. Just look at the Coconut Oil Global Market Report 2024, the kind of a compounded annual growth rate which it has registered in the recent years and the kind of scope it has in the future. Now, when it comes to the taxation on coconut oil, first of all, it was charged under the Central Excise Tariff Act 1985, where the coconut oil was included under the Section 3, Animal or Vegetable Fats and Oil, and carried an excise duty of 8%. Now, preparation for the use on hair, so that was charged for 16%. So if I'm using coconut as an edible oil, I was giving 8%. If I was using it as a kind of a hair oil, I was paying 16%. Now, this was brought in the line with the harmonized system of nomenclature, which is basically an international taxation norm which is published in 1988 by the World Customs Organization, which is an international body representing 186 custom administrations around the world. In June 2009, the Central Board of Excise and Custom that actually issued a circular classifying the coconut oil which is being sold in the container of less than 200 ml as a hair oil, so to be taxed at a higher rate of 16%. What is this harmonized system of nomenclature which comes in the news? So every product is basically marked like this. So let's say if you are buying a smartphone, it will be marked with this digital number, let's say 8517.13.40. This basically represents the electrical machinery which has been used. This represents the heading number of the telephone set. This will be your subheading number, and these are basically the duty rates and statistical classifications under the World Customs Organization, so keep that in mind. When it comes to the taxation on the coconut oil, remember that now the coconut oil should be classified as an edible oil regardless of the package size. So even if it is less than 200 ml, no 16% charge, only 5%. And this was done by applying the common parlance test. What does this common parlance test say? It basically is a kind of a test which we determine to the determination of the rate of tax for a particular product, where the idea is that the words in taxing shall be introduced in their popular sense, thus not in technical or scientific sense. So basically, let's say for example, if most of the people are using this coconut oil as an edible oil and very less for as a hair oil, then the common parlance is what? That coconut is basically what? A kind of an edible oil. So under this common parlance test, we will consider oil as the edible oil only, the coconut oil as edible oil only. So remember this common parlance test which is applied to determine the rate of taxation for a product, where we actually see the common man's perception about the commodities. Keep this information in your mind. We move forward to the next news, where India and France has actually recently signed a memorandum of understanding to establish the world's biggest national museum, which is going to come up in our country, which forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of art and culture. So basically, we are going to develop what? A national museum, and that is going to be on the model of what? On the lines of Louvre in Paris, which is the National Museum of France in Paris, which basically contains the very much famous your Mona Lisa painting, right? So that is kept there only. Now this museum is going to be named what? Yugeen Bharat, and when it will be completed, it will be the world's largest museum in the world. Our foreign minister said that this basically marks the expression of the international cooperation in the field of art and culture. So you guys can use this as a kind of idea of soft diplomacy as well. What are the other areas of cooperation when it comes to France and India? So India and France very recently has kind of launched India-France-UAE Maritime Partnership. Then we are also connecting our economic routes with France through our India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Then there are various exercises which we conduct with France, as for example Shakti, Varun and Garud. Also with France we have a strategic partnership from the year of 1998, and very recently for the economic cooperation we have launched the Horizon 2047 partnership in line with the idea of Viksit Bharat by 2047. And that is also reflected in our trade, where first of all we have a positive balance of trade with France, keep this in mind, and that trade is more than $15 billion in the last few years. Now just have a quick look at the history of our national museum. So the National Museum was actually established on the recommendation of the Gwyer Committee 1946, where a major role was actually played by the Director of Archaeological Survey of India at that time, who was Mortimer Wheeler. And it was inaugurated on the 15th of August 1949 for the very first time, and inaugurated by then Governor General of our country, whose name was C. Rajagopalachari. And who was the first director of our National Museum? That was Grace Marley. Now, when you read history and you read your ancient history and you come across various important artifacts which actually tells you a lot about what has happened in the past, a lot of that has actually been kept in the National Museum as well. So just have a quick glance at all of this. I will be asking certain questions to you. Your job is to actually answer those questions in the comment box. Such as, for example, when it comes to the Indus Valley civilization, which the kind of the mature phase started from 2750 BC and it existed around 1800 BC. So during that time, there were various prominent cities from where we find, let's say, for example, the world's oldest bronze statue of Dancing Girl. Can anyone of you tell me from which particular city of IVC? Then we have found various kind of skeletons from Rakhigadi. Rakhigadi, which is called as the provincial capital of Indus Valley civilization, considering it is the largest excavated site which we have. Then we find the terracotta image of Mother Goddess. Also, we find Pashupati seal here. So can you guys tell me which are the animals which are depicted on the Pashupati seal from your static portion? Then there is a kind of a toy cart as well, which we find at IVC, and you guys can see all of that here as well. The red and black pottery of Indus Valley civilization, the skeletons of Rakhigadi, the Mother Goddess, and the bronze statue of Dancing Girl. Then there are various prominent collections which we have from the time period of 4th to 1st century BC, such as, for example, the Vedikas and the Toranas of the Buddhist stupas. So those railings which actually depicts, let's say, for example, the last episode of Buddha's life, which is basically called as Mahaparinirvana. So that is actually shown from the Bharhut railing stupa. Then there is another kind of railing which actually depicts the story of sage Asita visit. Sage Asita, which will actually visit the king Sudhodana and make the prophecy that your child is either going to become the greatest king or the greatest monk of the world. And that is why Sudhodana will make sure that Buddha is sheltered with all the luxuries in the palace itself, right? Unless and until the event of Mahabhinishkraman will take place, where he will leave the palace at the age of 29 years and become a pravajaka or a wanderer. Then the museum also contains various artifacts from the Gandhara and the Mathura school of art, which actually developed during the Kushan period, right? So remember all these details. Just try to answer the questions which has been asked, and we move forward to the next news, where we are going to understand that what do we mean by a protected area regime and the idea of an inner line permit. The reason for that is that because after 13 years, the protected area regime has been brought back again in the region of Manipur. So the Manipur government actually announced that the center has reimposed the protected area regime or the protected area permit in the state as well as in Mizoram, Nagaland, all three of them which borders the Myanmar currently. And there is a kind of a issue of ethical issues which are taking place, let's say, for example, in Myanmar, because of which there are a lot of people who are actually fleeing from the region. You guys can actually recall about, let's say, for example, the Rohingyas refugees. So that has actually created a kind of a tension at the border. For that purpose, the inner line permit has been brought. Bringing back the restriction after 13 years was actually necessary in the light of security concerns over the influx from the neighboring countries. So let's try to understand that what do we mean by this idea of inner line permit. The idea actually originates from the time period of Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation of 1873. And this inner line permit is actually issued by the state governments to under which particular order. So there is not a particular act, it is an order through which this inner line permit is actually issued, and that is Foreigners Protected Areas Order 1958. Currently, now after its implementation in Manipur, it is now being implemented in 4 states, and that is Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram. What do we mean by this inner line permit? So this is basically the last line to which a foreigner can visit on visa, and the citizen can visit without any special permit. After this inner line permit, can foreigner and let's say, for example, any national can go? Yes. But for that purpose, you will require a special permit. That is something which you are going to learn further. Now, it obviously acts as a kind of a regulatory barrier to the tourism and impacts the economy. So that is what the article is emphasizing today. Now let's try to understand that according to the Ministry of Home Affairs guidelines, a foreign national is not allowed to visit a protected area or after this inner line permit as laid down in this Foreigners Order 1958, unless it is established to the satisfaction of the government that there are extraordinary reasons to justify a visit. So can you visit? Yes, but you will have to justify your visit that there are certain extraordinary reasons for that. The guideline also specifies certain areas within these protected areas which can be visited by the tourist with a permit. For grant of such protected area permit for reason any other than tourism, the prior permission of Ministry of Home Affairs is required. Now, even with this relaxation, remember that certain restrictions continue to in the place. For example, citizens and foreign nationals of Afghanistan, China and Pakistan origin still need prior approval from the MHA for even entering into these states. Or through the course of the ongoing conflict, the Manipur government and the most section of Meitei civil society have alleged that an uncontrolled influx of illegal migrants from the Chin community which shares an ethnic bond with the Kuki, Zumi and the Mizos from Myanmar was one of the key reasons for the instability in the state, and that is why the inner line permit has been currently deployed in Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram. So just remember this and we move forward to the next news, where we are actually going to understand the new kind of popular drugs for weight loss which has now been endorsed by the World Health Organization. To understand that, let's first have a quick overlook about the issue of obesity and diabetes in our country. So, as per the recent report of the National Family Health Survey, it basically tells us that 1 out of every 4 person in our country is obese now. If we look at the age-wise incidence of obesity, just see, even between age of 15 to 19 years in our most formative phase, 5% people are actually obese, and that number increases to 36% between the age of 40 to 49 years. When we look at the urban-rural divide in the incidence of obesity, in urban areas it is around 33% and in rural areas obviously it is going to be less and it is around 19%. When it look at the top 5 countries with the issue of diabetes, India ranks at 7 there with around 74 million people who are suffering from diabetes. Almost half of the diabetes cases are undiagnosed worldwide. In India, that is 39.4 million cases. In China, that is 72.8 million cases. So obviously, this issue of obesity and diabetes is a major concern. That is why the WHO scientist has discovered or endorsed a new class of medicine known as GLP-1 receptor agonist, GLP-1RS, which basically mimics a kind of a hormone that regulates appetite and blood sugar level to manage the obesity. The article itself suggests that globally 1 in 8 people were obese in 2022 according to World Health Organization, and in India around 4.4 crore women and 2.6 crore men are obese. As per the Lancet report, 89 crore adults and 16 crore adolescents were actually obese in our country. So thus there were any steps which were being taken in our country as well? Yes, absolutely. In India, they are conducting bioequivalence trials to actually acquire the patent rights. The WHO has also drafted guidelines for the use of GLP-1RS. That includes drugs like, for example, semaglutide and tirzepatide, which have the potential to be transformative. Very sorry for my pronunciation. Then there are certain other drugs as, for example, Ozempic, which are helpful to treat type 2 diabetes, or for example Wegovy, which can be used to treat chronic weight management treatments. So remember these name of the terms of the drugs which can appear in your prelims examination, and with this we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.